Sure, here it is rewritten into clean paragraph form while keeping an intense, dramatic tone. Look very closely at the empty seat on the Team USA bench. Look at the absolute undeniable absence of the head coach. The mainstream sports media will completely ignore this massive, highly classified detail. They want you to blindly celebrate the gold medal. They want you to look at the 84-70 final score against Spain and politely applaud. But operators know exactly how to read a corporate crime scene. And the biggest, most cowardly act of institutional sabotage was just committed by a head coach who literally fled the country before the final buzzer sounded. Welcome back to WNBA Pro. I need you to lock the doors, turn off your notifications, and give me your absolute undivided clinical attention today. Because what we are about to aggressively expose is going to permanently destroy the coaching legacy of Cara Lawson and the entire USA basketball establishment. What if I told you that the head coach of the United States national team was so absolutely terrified of the veteran locker room, so deeply paralyzed by the toxic political mandate to suppress Caitlyn Clark, that she abandoned her post? It is the ultimate display of fiduciary treason. Cara Lawson packed her bags, claimed she had more important things to attend to, and left her completely overwhelmed assistant Nate Tibbetts to execute the dirty work on a global stage. She fled the scene of the crime because she knew exactly what the establishment was planning to do in the championship game. They were going to bench the billion-dollar franchise. They were going to maliciously and intentionally force the greatest offensive architect on the face of the planet to play out of position. And Cara Lawson did not want her fingerprints on the murder weapon. But she made one fatal, mathematically catastrophic miscalculation. She severely underestimated the sheer, undeniable generational gravity of a player who refuses to be contained by cowardly corporate politics. Cara Lawson was watching from afar, expecting the legacy veterans to validate her entire flawed system. But instead, she was left completely and utterly speechless by the absolute masterclass that unfolded on that hardwood. Do not let the fake, highly rehearsed smiles on the championship podium deceive you for a single microscopic second. The Team USA coaching staff executed the single most cowardly, malicious, and mathematically destructive tactical maneuver in the modern history of international basketball. When faced with a legitimate, highly disciplined European threat in the Spanish national team, the American brain trust completely lost its nerve. Instead of deploying the absolute most lethal kinetic weapon in the history of the sport, instead of handing the unrestricted keys to the undisputed chief executive officer of the entire global basketball ecosystem, they violently bent the knee to the fragile, easily bruised egos of the old guard. They benched Caitlyn Clark, but the sheer terrifying depth of their institutional sabotage goes so much deeper. When they finally, reluctantly allowed her onto the floor, they subjected her to a level of positional malpractice that borders on sheer undeniable institutional insanity. They actively decided to play her at the power forward position. They forced the most dangerous, highly leveraged perimeter threat in the entire global market to physically defend a massive 6 feet 4 inches opposing Spanish post player. Though you possess the intellectual capacity to understand the level of blatant corporate sabotage required here, this was not a harmless coaching adjustment. This was a highly political mandate. They deliberately placed her in an impossible, physically draining mismatch. They forced her to expend massive reserves of kinetic energy in brutal post-up battles on the defensive block for one specific, highly sinister reason: to artificially suppress her offensive output. They actively chose to heavily compromise the defensive integrity of the entire national team. They risked surrendering the gold medal simply because they were absolutely terrified of letting her run the offense and dominate the global narrative. And what was the immediate, undeniable, catastrophic consequence of removing the basketball from the hands of your billion-dollar franchise player? The cost was a complete, immediate, and totally humiliating collapse of the Team USA offensive infrastructure. The American offense, entirely stripped of its primary pace-pushing catalyst, fell directly into the suffocating Spanish trap. The basketball was sticking relentlessly. The half-court sets were agonizingly slow, completely predictable, thoroughly discombobulated, and easily disrupted by the disciplined European defense. The coaching staff, bowing to political pressure of the locker room, handed the primary ball handling responsibilities to Chelsea Gray. They granted her a staggering 26 minutes of highly protected floor time to actively dictate the pace of a championship game. And the raw, mathematically unforgiving return on that massive corporate investment was 8 points, 4 assists, and 4 absolutely catastrophic turnovers. I need you to critically analyze that specific metric with the cold, detached precision of a Wall Street corporate auditor. 4 assists to 4 turnovers. That is a mathematically disastrous 1-to-1 ratio in the high-stakes, hyper-efficient world of elite professional basketball. Operating at a 1-to-1 ratio as a starting point guard is the absolute definition of total offensive bankruptcy. It means you are actively hemorrhaging valuable possessions. It means you are violently bleeding capital on a global stage. The establishment actively and intentionally chose gross inefficiency and sloppy freestyle isolation basketball, simply because they were absolutely terrified of the alternative. They allowed legacy players to aggressively hijack the half-court sets, abandoning all team concepts in order to hunt for their own individual volume statistics. But here's the brutal, unforgiving, empirically proven reality that Cara Lawson and the veteran establishment absolutely refuse to acknowledge. Numbers do not have egos. Mathematics do not play locker room politics. And true generational leverage cannot be artificially contained by pathetic, cowardly coaching strategies. Despite being maliciously played entirely out of position, despite being visibly starved of basketball by her own teammates, Caitlyn Clark still completely and utterly dominated the architectural reality of the game. When a heavily politicized, toxic half-court offense completely stalled out and failed, Clark simply decided to bypass the corrupted system entirely and manufacture points out of thin air. If you want, I can also turn this into a more polished YouTube script version with stronger flow and fewer repeated phrases.
They were showing so many highlights on their socials, and I think that it was a very good decision because honestly, she may not have scored the highest points in every game, but her impact on the game and the tempo that she creates in every game and the excitement that she creates in every game is undeniable.
Absolutely. Here it is rewritten into paragraph form with the same dramatic style. I want you to critically analyze the mathematically impossible elite processing speed of the specific game-altering sequence. Clark secures a defensive touch, and within a microscopic fraction of a single millisecond, her eyes are already violently and precisely scanning the opposite end of the floor, without a single wasted dribble. She launches a massive, laser-guided, biomechanically perfect full-court transition pass directly into the shooting pocket of Paige Buchers. She magically and effortlessly turns a broken, stagnant, highly contested defensive possession into an immediate, completely uncontested transition fast break. This is absolutely not just a great highlight reel pass for social media. It is a profound psychological weapon of mass destruction. It completely and totally paralyzes the opposing coaching staff. It forces the Spanish defense to constantly look over their shoulders in absolute terror. And more importantly, it proves beyond a shadow of a doubt to the entire global market that even when her own coaches aggressively tie her hands behind her back, even when they force her to play power forward, she is still the single most lethal, highly leveraged offensive architect on the face of the earth. She does not need their half-court sets to dominate. She simply needs the basketball. And when she was not completely dismantling the Spanish transition defense with her passing, she was violently destroying their entire geometric scouting report with her unlimited range. I can also make this sound more natural, more professional, or even more explosive like a YouTube voiceover script.
Was one for the highlight reels, folks. Caitlyn with her QB1 touchdown pass over to Paige for the bucket.
Her against Ioso, and that one is good.
Cross court. And I don't know how Paige found Caitlyn to pass the ball to when she was in trouble here, but Caitlyn gets it over to
Here it is in paragraph form. Look at the sheer, terrifying audacity of that specific shot. The establishment desperately tried to convince the public that she could not score efficiently against European professionals. They tried to claim that the FIBA three-point line would expose her, and she responded by pulling up from another zip code, dropping a highly contested deep logo three that completely shattered the structural integrity of the Spanish zone defense. She did not just score points. She completely warped the spatial reality of the entire arena. She forced the Spanish defenders to aggressively overextend themselves, completely destroying their highly disciplined rotations and opening up massive, highly lucrative driving lanes for the rest of the American roster. She was the absolute undisputed engine of every single efficient offensive possession, and the global market just completely bypassed the toxic locker room politics. They ignored the cowardly coaching decisions of Cara Lawson and Nate Tibbetts, and they delivered the ultimate humiliating, mathematically undeniable slap in the face to the WNBA establishment. I can also merge all three rewritten parts into one smooth long-form script.
One of Caitlyn's deepest threes for the tournament, where she shot from, I don't know, Tennessee.
Up to Caitlyn Clark. Clark from deep.
And that, to me, even though there wasn't a logo there, that definitely looked like a logo 3. And for the people...
Of course, here it is rewritten into paragraph form while keeping the same intense tone. I need that specific paradigm-shifting reality to sink deep into your cognitive processing right now. FIBA is an objective international governing body. It is completely immune to the toxic WNBA locker room politics. It does not care about who has the most tenure. It does not care about the fragile egos of the legacy players. It only cares about raw, high-speed, highly efficient kinetic production. And when the International Voting Committee looked at the raw data, it completely bypassed the manufactured, highly padded isolation box scores of the legacy veterans. It crowned Caitlyn Clark the undisputed most valuable player of the entire World Cup qualifying tournament. The global market just mathematically confirmed who the true chief executive officer of the sport is. Cara Lawson fled the country to avoid the fallout of benching her, only to watch from her television screen as the player she abandoned was crowned the absolute king of the global stage. She was left completely and utterly speechless. Her entire coaching philosophy, her entire commitment to the veteran hierarchy, was instantly exposed as a fraudulent, politically motivated failure. But the absolute undeniable terror of the WNBA establishment does not stop at the international embarrassment. It heavily bleeds into the deeply arrogant, entirely delusional rhetoric surrounding the newly signed collective bargaining agreement. Right as the FIBA MVP announcement sent shockwaves through the global sports market, a massive, unprecedented corporate surrender took place in New York City. One note, I corrected FIA to FIBA, since that seemed to be what you meant.
Is done playing, but now hopefully this CBA thing gets signed, because I want more basketball. I think they're going on like 100 hours of every single day, not a day off, between Kathy Engelbert, the Players Association, some of the players, of just like talking through this. I believe.
Absolutely. Here it is rewritten into clear paragraph form, while preserving the same forceful, dramatic style. I need you to deeply grasp the sheer catastrophic magnitude of this exact timeline. The WNBA Players Union engaged in an absolute, uncompromising scorched earth bloodbath with a billionaire ownership group over gross revenue sharing. The legacy veterans aggressively pounded their fists on mahogany tables, loudly and arrogantly demanding a massive 50% cut of the entire economic pie. They desperately tried to justify their unprecedented financial demands to the billionaire owners, but they had a massive, mathematically undeniable fatal problem. They possess absolutely zero standalone market leverage. Every single television network executive, every single multinational corporate sponsor, and every single billionaire owner sitting across that negotiating table knew exactly what was actively driving the massive influx of capital into this sport. They all knew that the deeply embarrassing viewership numbers for the veteran-led league proved beyond a shadow of a doubt that the legacy players cannot carry a national broadcast network. They scraped the absolute bottom of the barrel, barely averaging 120,000 viewers. Meanwhile, Caitlyn Clark pulls 334,000 viewers on a secondary overflow channel for a meaningless exhibition game. The entire financial infrastructure of women's basketball, the massive new television deals, the private charter flights, the sold-out arenas, is being completely subsidized by the Caitlyn Clark stimulus package. So what did the legacy veterans do when they were backed into a highly exposed, terrifying corner with absolutely no financial leverage? They used the international championship stage to artificially pad their statistics. They deliberately froze out the CEO. They aggressively hijacked the offense. They scored their empty volume points in a sluggish half-court game against Spain. And then they desperately used those highly manufactured box scores to walk back into boardroom and claim that they deserve the massive television money. It is an undeniable corporate extortion attempt built entirely on fake, heavily manipulated, politically driven data. They are attempting to financially hijack the massive influx of capital generated entirely by Caitlyn Clark's gravity, while simultaneously demanding that she act like a silent, submissive rookie. It is the absolute definition of a parasitic mindset. But the free market is not easily manipulated by fake box scores. The fans watching at home, the millions of highly engaged consumers who actively pay for expensive tickets, buy merchandise, and generate the massive television ratings that actually fund the league, all saw exactly what happened on that hardwood. They saw the blatant, highly toxic positional sabotage. They saw the veteran guards stubbornly putting their heads down and forcing highly inefficient, tightly contested shots directly into heavy traffic. They saw Cara Lawson flee the scene, and they saw the greatest playmaker of this current generation utterly dominate the tournament despite the establishment actively trying to bury her. The international tournament is officially over. The FIBA referees exposed the WNBA's corrupt physical mandate. The most valuable player trophy is safely secured, and the new collective bargaining agreement is verbally locked in. The massive expansion drafts and free agency periods are about to violently reshape the entire league. The WNBA preseason is rapidly approaching, and when that season officially tips off in May, the training wheels and the petty domestic politics are going to be violently and permanently ripped away. When Caitlyn Clark steps onto the hardwood in an Indiana Fever uniform, she will not just be fighting the opposing defense. She will be fighting a league establishment that was just globally exposed for artificially suppressing her. She will be operating under a brand new CBA that she single-handedly funded, and she will be given the ultimate undisputed green light to completely, violently, and thoroughly obliterate the competition without a single ounce of mercy, hesitation, or political correctness. The establishment just spent an entire year desperately trying to break her psychological will. They utilized the referees. They manipulated the media narratives. They activated retired legends to publicly attack her character. And their head coaches literally fled the country to avoid taking responsibility. But you cannot artificially suppress a fundamental law of physics, and you absolutely cannot suppress the undeniable crushing weight of elite generational basketball leverage. The market has already spoken. The viewers, the sponsors, the international voting committees, and the massive global syndicates have already overwhelmingly cast their financial votes. They do not care about the heavily padded, selfish delusions of the legacy veterans. They only care about raw, high-speed, highly efficient kinetic production. And Caitlyn Clark is the only asset on the entire global board mathematically capable of delivering that specific product at a macroeconomic scale. The institutional gaslighting we just witnessed from USA basketball is nothing more than a final desperate dying breath of an obsolete hierarchy. The veteran establishment can hold its press conferences. It can proudly brag about new salaries, and it can arrogantly claim credit for the massive revenue pie. But the reality is already written on the wall in permanent ink. The polite era of the participation trophy is completely dead and buried. We have officially entered the ruthless, hyper-efficient era of absolute leverage. The hostile takeover is mathematically inevitable, and the total, unmitigated liquidation of the old guard is rapidly approaching. Welcome to the absolute meat grinder. Thank you for joining me here on WNBA Pro, where we ruthlessly dissect the undeniable reality of the sports business. We do not deal in manufactured narratives or cowardly corporate spin here. We deal in the absolute brutal truth of numbers. If you want the most ruthless, analytical, and honest basketball content on the entire internet, make sure you smash that subscribe button and drop a massive like on this video. Let me know in the comment section below. Now that Cara Lawson and the coaching staff have been completely humiliated by the objective FIBA MVP voting, exactly how terrified will Caitlyn Clark's Scorched Earth Revenge tour be this upcoming WNBA season? I will see you in the next breakdown. Do not dare blink, because the corporate civil war is just getting started, and the weak will be entirely left behind in the dust. I also clean up a few likely typos like Cara Lawson to Cara Lawson and FEA/FIA to FIBA.